This is the multi-voice text-to-speech podfic reading of Supernature by 5HT, composed by Burning Aurora. Chapter 1. Remus has his house key inches from the deadbolt when the door flies open, and Sirius, visibly flushed, reaches out and hauls him in over the threshold by his arm.
Hey!
But his greeting is cut off by an urgent kiss, and then the scent reaches his nose. Sirius guides Remus's hands to his hips, rising onto his tiptoes and licking into his mouth, hungry.
Baby,
Remus says when Sirius pulls back, eyes wild. Remus brings a hand up to his cheek and brushes it with the backs of his fingers. He's hot to the touch.
Why didn't you text me? I could have left early.
Sirius shakes his head, his hands roaming restlessly over Remus's chest and shoulders.
It only hit like an hour ago. It just came on really fast. I had to leave work in the middle of a job.
Remus searches his face, brushing a lock of hair off his sweaty forehead. Sirius takes fierce pride in the work he does at his shop, and never lets something as trivial as his undeniable biological urges interfere with that. For him to abandon a job half done means he's already in a terrible state.
The meds aren't working anymore.
No. Maybe. I don't know.
Sirius says, looking agitated. The suppressants don't eliminate his cycle, but they make the heat duller, more manageable. He's been on this one for a few years now, so it's likely that his body has finally habituated to it. Omega hormones are powerful things.
I don't really want to talk about pharmaceuticals right now, do you?
Remus grins, dropping his bag to the floor and winding his arms around Sirius's waist.
Not particularly.
Sirius leans in, pressing his face to Remus's chest and inhaling deeply, nuzzling for a moment, then letting out a heated little growl.
God, you smell like that fucking bitch.
He snarls, working open Remus's shirt buttons and shoving the offending garment off his shoulders.
Who, Vanessa?
Remus asks, undoing his cuffs and letting the shirt fall to the floor.
I barely saw her today.
Vanessa is their office administrator, and she made the fatal mistake of smiling while she handed Remus a drink at last year's Christmas party.
Well, I can fucking smell her,
Sirius says.
She wears the disgusting perfume because she knows you'll come home smelling like it.
Remus tries not to laugh, but yeah, he laughs.
She does not.
She wants you,
Sirius says, pressing his face into Remus's neck and sniffing. He hums, apparently satisfied, and starts nuzzling again, mindlessly.
She's married, babe. Also pregnant, again.
I know what I saw.
Okay,
Remus says, grinning. He slides his hands down to grab Sirius's ass pointedly.
Is that what you wanted to talk about?
Sirius groans.
No, I want to talk about how I'm crawling out of my skin and I'm so wet I can feel it on my thighs, and if I don't get your knot in me soon I'm probably going to die of actual heat stroke.
Remus hums, pressing Sirius against him roughly.
That's a much better topic,
he says, tipping his face down to bury his nose in Sirius's hair, inhaling a lungful of his scent.
Fuck, you smell good.
He always smells good, a bizarre combination of mango shampoo and motor oil, and that underlying bass that's just Sirius, just mate and love and home. But tonight there's a heavy, almost sickly layer above all of that, curling into Remus's chest with every breath, making him dumb and dizzy. Sirius pulls off his neck to haul his own t-shirt over his head. He's broken out in sweat, just damp and sticky all over.
God, baby, you're hot,
Remus says, his voice pitching lower as he lets Sirius's heat really wash over him, feels himself hardening in his pants just from the scent and the feel of that burning skin pressed against his own.
Too hot,
Sirius mutters, hands now fumbling with the button of his pants. Remus helps him, pulls the zip down, and pushes his jeans and underwear over his hips. It takes a few tugs to get them off completely, too tight and too damp with sweat to slide easily. Remus brings his hands back to Sirius's ass, fingers dipping into the cleft, and God, he wasn't kidding.
Jesus, you're so wet,
Remus says, his voice strained. He parts Sirius's cheeks with his hands, roughly, and lets one fingertip brush over his slick hole.
God.
Sirius gasps.
Don't touch it unless you're planning to fuck it right fucking now.
Remus smacks his ass lightly.
Bed.
Sirius all but sprints up over the stairs, and Remus follows, feeling remarkably like a lion chasing down a gazelle, except the lion probably isn't trying to run with a massive erection. He assumes. He doesn't watch Animal Planet. He catches up at the threshold of their bedroom, and can't help but grab Sirius's hips, pulling him back and letting him feel how hard Remus is. He brushes Sirius's hair off his neck, finding a faint, barely there mark that he put there last month. He mouths at it, letting his teeth scrape against the delicate skin, not biting down just yet. That spot will be angry red by the end of the night, and purple by morning. Remus wants to purr at the thought. He nips at Sirius's earlobe, because he can't keep his teeth to himself.
Get on the bed, baby. Show me your hole.
Sirius shudders, and Remus lets him go. He flies to the bed, flinging himself face down, getting his knees under himself and raising his ass. Presenting, the way he knows Remus wants. Remus hastily sheds the rest of his clothes. He's feeling, more than hearing, the low growls accompanying his every exhale. He watches as Sirius reaches back with both hands and spreads himself open, and Remus can't help but wrap a hand around himself, squeezing around the base of his cock, sure he can feel it starting to fill out already. Yeah, the suppressants are definitely not working. This is a natural heat, and Remus's body knows it.
What are you doing?
Sirius demands, face pressed into the pillows. Remus crawls onto the bed then, replacing Sirius's hands with his own.
Admiring,
he says simply, and can't resist ducking down and pressing the flat of his tongue right against Sirius's wet hole.
God, Remus.
Sirius gasps, and Remus takes this as encouragement, lapping at him again, then dipping the tip of his tongue inside, using his thumbs to pull him open.
You taste so fucking good.
Remus breathes, and what he doesn't say is that Sirius tastes different. Remus can count on one hand the number of unsuppressed heats they've spent together over the years, and they're always far enough apart that he manages to forget how it feels. Everything about Sirius is sharper tonight, sweeter, his scent and his taste and the fucking air around him. This is his body receptive, not just ready to be bred but asking for it, begging. Remus is powerless in the face of all that. This is not the night it's going to happen. Even with Sirius off his suppressants, Remus is on the pill, and besides, the throes of a random, unexpected full heat is probably not the time to make that decision, right? But they've talked about it, more and more, and Remus has thought about it, constantly, and he knows Sirius has too. It feels within reach right now, and Remus's head is starting to get fuzzy with the scent in the air and Sirius's hot skin under his hands and the taste of his slick on his tongue. And at this moment there is no logic or reason to be had. He wants to breed Sirius tonight, and he's gonna fucking do it. Sirius moans into the pillow as Remus presses 2 fingers inside him, rocking back against the intrusion, and in a heartbeat he's taken them in up to the knuckle.
Fuck,
Remus says roughly, pulling them out and fucking them back in, awestruck at the heat of it. Sirius is burning up. Gasping, Sirius reaches back and grasps Remus's wrist, holding it in place as he fucks himself on those 2 fingers, half out of his mind now that he's got something inside him.
Okay, baby, fuck, okay.
Remus tries to still him, but Sirius just whines, shoving back against his hand.
Sirius.
He tries again, and Sirius finally stops, his arm falling back to the bed limply.
Fuck me,
Sirius says, and he sounds absolutely destroyed. So where is he even going to go from here? They've got hours ahead of them yet. Remus draws his fingers out and winces when it pulls a high whimper from Sirius.
Sorry,
Remus mutters, shuffling forward on his knees, grasping his cock and dragging the head over that slick hole.
Fucking wet as hell, baby.
Don't tease,
Sirius begs.
Shush,
Remus says mindlessly, stroking his hip, using one hand to gather up some of that slippery fluid and spread it down his length.
Don't fucking shush me.
Sirius breaks off with a cry as Remus presses inside. He has every intention of taking it slow, of letting Sirius adjust, even for just a moment, but the urgency is catching, and Remus digs his blunt nails into Sirius's narrow hips and drives in, and in, and in, until he's flush against his ass. Remus drops his head, squeezing his eyes shut, white noise like static filling his brain, pushing out the higher thoughts, the ones that usually override his inborn instincts. There's nothing but the hot, wet clutch of Sirius all around him, the scent of his heat hanging in the stifling air, and the fucking sounds spilling out of Sirius's open, panting mouth, half smashed into the pillow. He feels Sirius moving beneath him, loosens his grip on his hips as Sirius starts to rock, back and forth, drawing off Remus's cock as much as his position will allow, and then shoving back onto it.
You can't fucking wait,
Remus says, shaking his head.
You need it that bad, huh?
Yes.
Sirius grits out, and Remus has no doubt that if his eyes were open, they'd be rolling. Remus likes asking questions to which he already knows the answer, and Sirius likes pretending it annoys him.
You just gonna take it, baby. Fuck yourself, till I fill you up.
If I have to.
Sirius says, breathless, rising up on his elbows to gain some leverage and surging back with a force that almost knocks Remus off balance. He grasps Sirius's waist, digging his fingers into the soft flesh, stilling his movements with Remus's cock pushed to its limit inside him. Leaning down, he sinks his teeth into Sirius's shoulder, his jaw tight with the need to bite and mark all that pale skin. Sirius cries out at the pain, muscles tightening around Remus's cock.
I'm gonna fucking breed you,
Remus says, in a voice he barely recognizes as his own, low and rough, threatening.
Yes.
Sirius hisses, squirming as Remus bites down again over the same spot.
Say it,
Remus says with a growl, bringing his hands down to the mattress to hold his weight, boxing Sirius in with his larger body, covering him completely.
Breed me.
Sirius gasps, and that alone would be enough, but he's not done.
Fucking not me, fill me up and not me so it takes, baby, please, please.
Remus pulls back and snaps his hips forward, shoving Sirius up the bed an inch and snarling, latching onto his shoulder savagely, using his teeth as an anchor to keep him in place. He knows Sirius likes the pain, loves wearing the marks, actually pouts when they start to fade, and that's good, because Remus has never been capable of reining in his urge to dig his teeth into all that soft, pale flesh. He drives his hips forward, just rutting, barely pulling out at all, because either of them can stand to separate for the split second it takes to do so. Sirius is so wet, Remus can feel it on his balls, all around the base of his cock, slick and messy. Remus pulls his mouth from his shoulder to find that spot red and raw, teeth marks indenting the skin, and he groans at the thought of the bruise that will take their place in a few hours.
Who owns you, baby?
You.
Sirius sobs, rocking back to meet Remus's hips as they drive into him.
I fucking own you,
Remus says, just to hammer the point home. He noses into Sirius's hair, scraping his teeth up the side of his neck before he bites again, just under his jaw, impossible to hide.
Jesus, fuck.
Sirius says, startled at the pain, but then he tilts his head to give Remus better access, and God, Remus fucking loves him.
Come here,
He mutters, straightening, wrapping his arms around Sirius's middle and sitting back on his heels, pulling Sirius into his lap. He tilts his hips up and Sirius gasps, fingers grasping at his arms, digging in hard.
Fucking deep.
He says, and Remus grabs his hand, bringing it down to press his palm flat to his stomach just beneath his navel. Remus screws up into him again and Sirius moans, his head falling back onto Remus's shoulder, mouth hanging open. Remus still remembers the first time he felt it, 17 years old and equal parts horny and terrified when Sirius had taken his hand, pressed it against his belly and moaned,
I can feel your fucking dick inside me.
In hindsight, that may have been something of a defining moment for Remus's sexuality.
Can you feel me in there?
He asks, low, nipping at the sharp angle of his jaw. He presses his own hand there and thrusts again, feeling the swell in Sirius's flat stomach, the little bulge pushing out against his palm, the evidence of his too large cock stuffed inside that too small body.
Full.
Sirius manages to reply, speech starting to slur.
Not full enough,
Remus says, keeping his hand pressed tight on Sirius's belly and shoving up into him.
Are you, baby, you ready for my knot?
He feels Sirius nod, feels him tilt his head, and Remus uses his free hand to take a fistful of his hair and hold him in place for a sloppy, open-mouthed kiss.
Gonna breed you so good,
Remus promises, feeling his knot just starting to swell and still fucking up into Sirius as hard and as fast as their position allows.
Gonna watch you get big and round so everyone fucking knows.
Yeah.
Sirius whines, arching as he reaches back to grasp at Remus's neck, grinding down and clenching so fucking hard Remus can barely breathe. Sirius's cries start to pitch up, and Remus knows he can feel the stretch, knows this is his favorite part. It's getting harder to move now, the knot too big to pull out and still swelling, locking them together.
You gonna come on my knot?
Remus asks hoarsely, knowing the answer, feeling Sirius tightening impossibly around him even as he stretched to the limit around the base of Remus's cock. Remus feels the first jolt of his own orgasm and finds Sirius's hips, pulling him down and holding him still as he squirms, wailing, clenching rhythmically and coming in arcs across the bedspread.
Fuck. Fuck.
Sirius cries, his whole body taut and trembling, because Remus is still coming, and Sirius can feel it filling him. Remus groans into his neck, eyes screwed tight and cock jerking inside him with each pulse. Sirius sobs, probably more from relief than anything else, with Remus's cum providing an instant, if temporary, reprieve from his burning fever.
Hush, baby, it's okay,
Remus says, still holding his hips, and this time Sirius doesn't object to being shushed. This time he shivers, the tension draining from his muscles with a shuddering sigh. Remus runs his hands down Sirius's thighs soothingly, mouthing at the bite mark on his shoulder, feeling like he should apologize but knowing there's no point when he's just going to do it again in about half an hour.
Jesus.
Sirius says after a few minutes. Remus wraps his arms around his waist and gives him a squeeze.
Okay.
Sirius laughs weakly.
You felt that too, right?
Remus shuts his eyes and nods.
You're gonna need new meds.
Sirius hums, stroking his fingers over Remus's arm and turning his head to press a kiss to his cheek.
Or we could talk about it,
he says hesitantly. Remus feels a rush of emotion, chief among them arousal, because he's still hard and they're still tied together, and Sirius's heat is still very much in progress. He tightens his arms, turning and capturing Sirius's mouth in a kiss.
You wanna talk about it?
He asks, their lips brushing together.
Yeah.
Sirius breathes, reaching up to grab the back of Remus's head and kissing him again, heated and hungry. Remus feels him tighten around his cock and knows it's deliberate, just Sirius basking in the feeling of being filled. Remus presses his hand against Sirius's belly, imagining it rounded out, a soft little swell that would show so early on his slim frame. Sirius whimpers, and Remus feels a hand on top of his own at the same moment. He feels Sirius's tongue flicking into his mouth.
I want it,
Sirius says into the kiss, pressing Remus's hand firmly against his stomach. This does not qualify as talking about it, but Remus knows neither of them are actually capable of having that discussion at the moment, not with Sirius's heat still raging.
Hang on, babe,
Remus says, winding his arms tightly around Sirius's middle, supporting his weight carefully as he tips them forward, laying Sirius down on his stomach and settling on top of him.
Nod.
Sirius moans as Remus's cock shifts inside him, straining his legs apart.
Still doing okay?
Remus asks, mouthing at the nape of his neck.
Depends on your definition,
Sirius says. Remus feels him clenching rhythmically, his fever already rising. They're still tied, but at least like this, Remus can use his weight to help him thrust a little, just minute rolls of his hips to try to keep Sirius sated until the knot shrinks enough for Remus to fuck him properly again.
Better.
Sirius nods against the pillow, his hands clenched in the bedspread and his eyes closed.
I'm so fucking hot,
he says, his brows knitting together.
It's like pins and needles all over.
I know, baby.
Remus rolls them a touch so Sirius isn't pressed so fully into the damp bedclothes. He runs his palm down the length of Sirius's sweaty torso.
You're burning up.
Worst one in years,
Sirius says, arching and pushing his ass back against Remus's hips.
I just need.
Remus waits, stroking over his stomach, but Sirius just squirms and doesn't finish.
Tell me what you need,
Remus says, nosing into Sirius's sweaty hair and breathing deeply. Sirius sighs, frustrated, and Remus hears him swallow.
I need you to breed me. I need it so bad.
Remus lets out his breath with a low, rumbling growl, because he knows what Sirius means. It's not a frantic, heat-of-the-moment declaration, it's his body, it's a real, visceral need, like a physical thing you could reach out and touch, and Remus feels it too. Instinct is screaming at him that it's the solution. The only solution. And for a wild second, he wishes they could just be reckless.
I will,
he promises, and they both know it can't be tonight, but he still means it with his whole fucking chest. The heat allows them what feels like another 10 minutes of peace, but maybe even less than that, before the fever is peaking again and Sirius is whimpering, breath coming in soft little pants as the need flares in his chest. He reaches back, grabbing at Remus's ass with a gasp and a moan, and Remus realizes, after a beat, that his knot is going down.
Don't pull out yet,
Sirius whispers urgently, as if Remus would fucking dare. He rolls them onto their sides and starts to rock them back and forth. Not thrusting, just moving them as one, feeling his cum start to leak out of Sirius's hole, smearing their thighs and making their bodies slide wetly against each other.
How do you want it?
Remus asks, pulling back an inch or two and giving him a thrust, just a little tease of friction.
I don't fucking care,
Sirius says, shoving back roughly. Remus hums, biting down on the junction of his neck and shoulder and getting a soft
fuck
for his efforts.
Wanna get up in my lap?
Ha.
Sirius laughs, breathless, his fingers digging into Remus's ass.
Don't tell me you're tired already.
Remus hums.
Just thought you'd like to fuck yourself on my cock, since you were trying so hard to do it earlier.
He muses, dragging his teeth over the same spot again.
And, fuck. And you want to sit there and chew on my neck like the big bad wolf, right?
That's a bonus,
Remus admits, nosing against the fresh bite mark.
Okay.
Sirius says, like he's steeling himself, taking a steadying breath.
Okay, just.
He rolls forward, and this time Remus doesn't follow, gritting his teeth at the noise of absolute heartbreak Sirius makes when Remus's cock slips out of him.
Fuck, I hate it. Get. Sit up against the headboard, go.
He says, pushing himself up to his hands and knees. Remus goes as instructed and pulls Sirius over to straddle his lap. Before Remus can even get his hands up to steady him, Sirius is grasping his cock at the base and sinking down onto it with a groan.
Jesus,
Remus says, strained. Sirius starts to move immediately, grasping the headboard and forcefully impaling himself. Taking hold of his waist, Remus tries to guide him into a less punishing rhythm while Sirius whines in frustration.
I can't fucking control it,
he gasps, resting their foreheads together. Remus can feel the heat radiating off of him like the air that rises in waves from hot pavement in the sun. His body is taut, trembling, and he's clenching so hard on Remus's dick it's nearly painful.
I know, I can help, baby, just let me,
Remus says, still holding him, and Sirius finally relents, letting Remus direct him, giving him a little boost each time he lifts and steadying him on the downstroke. Not gentle by any definition, but not as frantic, allowing Remus to lift and tilt his own hips and change the angle to make Sirius moan and make his cock drip against their stomachs. Sirius gathers his hair in one hand, piling it up on his head with a grunt of annoyance.
Too fucking hot,
he whines. He casts his eyes to the side of the bed.
Can you reach that?
Remus follows his gaze to see a velvet scrunchie sitting on Sirius's nightstand. He reaches out with one long arm and snags it.
Thanks,
Sirius says, taking it and twisting his hair up into a disheveled knot at the top of his head, pieces already falling out when he gets the elastic secured around it, never once faltering in his rhythm on Remus's cock.
Better?
Remus asks, smiling. Sirius nods, but there's a look of frustration on his face, his brows drawn together.
I want your not so bad,
he says, then gives a breathless laugh.
And I just fucking had it 5 minutes ago.
You'll get it,
Remus tells him, sliding one of his hands down to Sirius's ass, feeling the base of his own cock, which never really had a chance to go all the way down, and tracing around Sirius's stretched hole. He swallows around a noise that tries to rumble its way up from his chest.
You've almost still got it. Does it hurt?
No. Yes, but no.
Sirius shakes his head, tilting it back and exposing the pale column of his throat, panting up at the ceiling.
Like a really, really good hurt. Like you're gonna split me in half and I'm gonna fucking thank you for it.
This time the noise can't be swallowed. Remus hears himself growl, surging forward and latching his teeth onto the delicate skin over Sirius's fluttering pulse. He gasps, fingers threading into Remus's hair and cradling his head.
Yes.
He hisses, tilting to give Remus access, his cock twitching between them. Sirius might tease Remus about this proclivity, but it's always been a mutual exchange. Remus pulls off, suckling gently at the hurt, kissing along his jaw until he finds his mouth, capturing his bottom lip and scraping his teeth along it. Sirius whimpers, and Remus smiles.
He likes wearing his alpha's marks,
he says teasingly, feeling Sirius clenching around him at the words.
Yes, Alpha.
Sirius breathes, shaky, smiling against his mouth, moaning when Remus bucks his hips to fuck up into him a little harder. They don't go much for traditionalist titles in their day-to-day, but heat makes them both half feral.
Want everyone to see.
Whole world's gonna see,
Remus says, going in for another bite, determined to leave Sirius dotted with them by night's end.
I'll mark up your neck and breed you full. You're gonna walk around smelling like me all the fucking time when you've got my baby in you.
Fuck.
Sirius whines, his rhythm faltering, arms winding around Remus's neck and holding on tight.
Need. So bad, so fucking bad, it hurts.
Remus feels a pang of sympathy amidst a heady rush of arousal.
I know it hurts, baby. I'm gonna take care of you, ha.
He reaches between them and grasps Sirius's cock lightly, listening to the pitch of his cries to tell if it's too much. Sometimes he's too sensitive for this during his heats, but it can help tire him out if he can stand it for long enough to let Remus get him off. Remus lowers his mouth to Sirius's clavicle, sucking a mark into the pretty jut of bone and finishing it off with another scrape of his teeth. Sirius is dripping over his hand, dripping onto his cock. Noise is reduced to tremulous sobs as he rocks between the dual stimulation, fucking into Remus's fist and down onto his swelling knot.
I'm gonna fill you up again, baby,
Remus whispers against his throat, trying to keep his voice from breaking, trying to keep his head, for Sirius's sake.
Breed this wet little hole and trap you right here on my knots so we know it'll take.
Fuck, oh fuck, yes.
Sirius pants high and needy. Remus thumbs over the head of his cock and hears Sirius's moans crescendoing into a cry, feels him clenching and pulses on his cock and feels the hot spill of his cum dribbling over his fingers. Remus groans, bringing his hand up to his own mouth and licking across his knuckles, getting a taste before Sirius is catching his wrist and sucking his fingers between his lips.
God, Sirius,
Remus grits out, his stomach tightening at the sight, Sirius flushed and shining with sweat, angry red marks dotting his shoulders and neck, cleaning his own mess off Remus's hand, still working himself frantically up and down on his cock like it's the most important thing in his life. And Remus can sympathize with that, because nothing feels more important than this, right now. Sirius runs the tip of his tongue between his fingers, chasing the taste of his cum, blinking slowly, dazed, as he moans.
Not me, breed me, please, baby, please.
Remus has to take his hand away then, because his knot is flaring and Sirius is still riding him, and Remus is the only one with the presence of mind left to make him stop before he hurts himself. He grabs Sirius's hips and pulls him down one last time, seating him fully on his knot with a strangled cry as he starts to come. It's a toss-up who's making more noise, because Remus is groaning, but Sirius is wailing, so much louder now than during his own orgasm, face shoved into Remus's neck and body trembling as Remus spills inside him. He can't tell if this one is longer than the first, or if he's just so heat-drunk from inhaling Sirius's scent that he's lost all concept of time. Sirius is whimpering by the time Remus feels his own muscles relax, squirming half-heartedly on the knot, his arms falling from Remus's shoulders to hang loosely at his sides. Remus swallows with difficulty, petting Sirius's head and wondering idly how much cum is left on that hand. He thinks Sirius might feel a little cooler, but it's hard to judge when they're both still sweating from exertion as much as his heat.
Fever?
He asks, surprised at the dry rasp in his voice. Sirius groans against his shoulder, letting Remus take his weight entirely.
5. Maybe 6.
Remus nods, licking his lips and scratching lightly into Sirius's hair.
Nap time?
Sirius grunts, and Remus gathers that that's all the response he's getting, so he sits up carefully, one hand on Sirius's back as he rearranges the pillows. Reclining against them, he lets Sirius rest on his chest. Sirius sighs, mumbling something unintelligible, and Remus kisses the top of his head.
Nap time,
he repeats, wrapping his arms around Sirius's shoulders. He feels the moment Sirius falls asleep, his breathing going steady and even. Closing his eyes, Remus inhales deeply through his nose. The scent is still sharp, which means the fever won't stay at a 5, maybe 6 for long, but it should at least be abated enough to let Sirius get some sleep while they're tied. Stroking his fingers up and down his spine, Remus lets himself drift too, the weight on his chest a soft comfort. For now, it's easy enough to ignore the drying sweat and cum on his skin, the stifling air in the room, the ache in every muscle. Sirius's need for rest supersedes all his other concerns. It's once again Sirius who feels the knot going down first, but it's only a tired little whimper that signals it before Remus feels it too. He shushes softly into Sirius's hair, lifting him carefully. Sirius is still asleep, mostly, so there's no resistance when Remus pulls out of his body, turning and laying him gently onto the bed on his back.
Hey,
Remus murmurs, stroking a hand over his hair, snagging a little where it's still piled into a bun. Sirius blinks blearily at him, saying nothing.
Gonna go on a supply run,
Remus says, and he can't resist trailing his fingers over Sirius's slack mouth. Sirius is so sweet like this, soft and sated cute, though Remus knows better than to say that out loud.
Any requests?
Sirius blinks again.
Water.
He croaks, and Remus nods, pushing himself off the bed with difficulty, both because he's sore as hell, and because there's a voice in his head screaming at him not to leave his mate's side for a single second, not even to save them both from sex-induced death by dehydration. He grabs a pair of boxers from his dresser, because he doesn't think the blinds are closed downstairs, and Mr. Gunnarsson and his ancient Shih Tzu don't need another glimpse into their private lives. Not after last time. He's almost at the stairs when a tired voice calls out behind him.
Chocolate.
In the kitchen, Remus gathers supplies onto a tray. Crackers, a dish of blueberries, a couple bottles of water. Sirius probably won't want any of the food, but Remus always feels the need to make it available. Reaching up on top of the fridge, he finds a basket containing several of Sirius's favorite chocolate bars, and takes 2. Glancing around, he takes in Sirius's discarded, grease-stained coveralls in a heap in the foyer. One steel-toed boot lies near them, the other 10 feet away, sitting below a black scuff mark on the wall, clearly having been forcefully kicked off. His helmet is in the corner next to the front door, dropped as soon as he got inside. Remus shakes his head at the thought of Sirius driving himself home in that state. He worries enough about him on that bike without having to think about him speeding down the highway, frantic with heat. Remus opens himself a bottle of water and drinks the whole thing, standing at the kitchen window and staring out at the street, lit up in pinks and yellows by the setting sun. 2 kids from the new family down the road are riding scooters up the sidewalk. Someone is walking a big golden retriever past their house. Across the street, the O'Briens are getting a pizza delivered. It feels surreal, almost, to step out of the little universe he and Sirius are sharing, so wrapped up and absorbed in each other, and look outside to see the world carrying on as usual. He leaves his empty bottle on the counter and takes the tray upstairs. Back in the bedroom, the air feels heavy, stagnant, and Sirius is asleep. Remus lays the tray on the bed and goes back into the hall to turn the AC on. He'd open a window, but well. They have neighbors out there. Sirius stirs as Remus sits on the edge of the bed closest to him, a little smile quirking his lips.
Did you get me chocolate?
He asks, his eyes still closed.
Water first.
Remus replies, taking a bottle off the tray, opening it and holding it out to him. Sirius opens his eyes and raises one arm, batting ineffectually at the bottle until Remus laughs.
Princess,
He mutters, sliding a hand under Sirius's back and sitting him up, and then, when Sirius makes no move to grasp it himself, holding the bottle to his lips and letting him drink from it. He finishes half of it before Remus pulls it away to give him a chance to breathe.
Simp.
Sirius counters, leaning back and smirking when Remus takes his weight on his arm, keeping him upright. He finishes the water, and Remus tosses the bottle to the floor, picking up one of the chocolate bars and ripping it open with his teeth. He shakes his head, grinning, when Sirius opens his mouth expectantly.
You say simp, I say strong and capable provider.
Remus says, breaking off a piece of the bar and feeding it to him. Sirius hums, eyes closing as he chews.
Whatever helps you sleep at night, big guy.
Remus feeds him another piece, then takes one for himself.
Where's the fever?
Sirius twists his mouth as he assesses.
7.
He decides after a moment.
I want your cock, but I also want to lie down and not move for a while longer, so maybe 15 minutes or so?
Remus nods, eating another bite of chocolate.
Want me to do anything while you lie down and do nothing?
Sirius purses his lips against a smile.
Are you calling me a pillow princess?
Remus places the tray of supplies safely on the floor before he crawls up onto the bed, bearing Sirius back onto the mattress.
I would never, baby. You know you rock my world and all that good stuff.
He says, nosing over Sirius's pulse and the angry red splotch his teeth left there earlier.
Roll over.
Sirius smiles then, a little indulgently, because this part is as much for Remus as it is for him. He rolls obediently, settling his head on his arms and stretching his legs out on the bed.
If I fall asleep,
He says, his voice muffled.
I'll never tell.
Remus says, kissing between his shoulder blades, down his spine, in the hollow of his back.
Thank you.
Sirius says, sighing and wriggling into the mattress. His skin is still so hot, but the first 2 rounds took the edge off his urgency, which means Remus gets to take his time for a little bit. Remus loves taking his time.
Thread your legs, Sirius.
He commands softly, smiling when Sirius obeys, shivering. Remus stretches his body out, settling on his front in between Sirius's thighs. He's too long for the bed like this, his feet hanging off the end. Reverently, he brings his hands to Sirius's ass and carefully spreads him open.
Oh, baby,
he says, hushed. Sirius's hole is red and puffy, glistening with his own slick and the slow drip of Remus's cum leaking out of him.
Your poor little hole is gaping,
Remus tells him, sliding his thumbs in close and pulling him open gently.
If only my alpha didn't have such an implausibly enormous dick.
You'd have a less satisfying sex life.
Precisely.
Sirius says, inching his legs wider in invitation. Remus leans in, pointing his tongue and just pressing it into his hole, coaxing out a little more slick and another drop of his own cum.
We taste so fucking good together,
he murmurs, closing his eyes and savoring as he licks a broad, wet stripe starting from Sirius's balls, lapping up a trickle of cum before it can reach the bedspread.
You're such a pervert,
Sirius says, but the pulse of slick Remus feels on his tongue belies his enjoyment.
Lucky you, huh?
Remus presses the tip of his middle finger against that twitching hole and watches it try to draw him inside.
Still doing okay?
Yeah, fuck yes,
Sirius says as Remus slides his finger in up to the last knuckle, meeting no resistance.
So fucking open for me, baby,
Remus says, giving in to the ache in his jaw and taking a hard bite of Sirius's pale, pert little ass cheek.
Jesus.
Sirius gasps, his body jerking.
Yes, I'm not falling asleep, at least.
Sorry,
Remus smiles, kissing the reddened skin in apology, drawing his finger out slowly, just admiring the sight of Sirius's hole trying to cling to him.
Sorry, I'll be nice.
Sirius hums, settling back into the pillows. Remus pushes in another finger easily, watching Sirius's body accept him, watching the cum and slick coating him up to his knuckles, slowly dripping onto the bedclothes beneath them. He leans in for another taste, tracing his tongue around the point where his fingers disappear inside Sirius, hearing a moan above him in answer to his own.
What a mess,
Remus muses, pumping his fingers in a few times, then pulling them out entirely and replacing them with his tongue, replicating the motion with short, quick stabs, gripping hard at Sirius's ass to hold him spread open. He feels a mix of cum and slick smearing on his chin as he seals his mouth over Sirius's hole, fucking it with his tongue, in and out, then dancing the tip all around that wet, twitching little furrow. Sirius starts to whine above him, his hips rocking so slightly Remus might not notice it if he weren't currently asphyxiating himself on Sirius's ass. Running soothing hands up his back, Remus feels a new sheen of sweat on his overheated skin.
Remus,
Sirius says, little more than a gasp into his folded arms. Remus pulls off for a breath and immediately pushes his fingers back inside, 3 this time, his face still close enough that Sirius must be able to feel his breath on his hole.
God, you smell like me.
Remus groans through gritted teeth, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand, feeling his own need curling hot in his belly again. A mess of fluids is dripping out over his hand, down his wrist, and a wet, sucking noise is accompanying every motion now as he thrusts his fingers. Remus casts his eyes up at Sirius to see if he hears it, too.
oh fuck.
Sirius turns his face into the bed, and Remus knows the flush on the back of his neck is only about 50% attributable to his heat.
Listen, baby,
Remus says, moving to sit up on his knees, still fucking into Sirius slowly, deliberately, with 3 thick fingers, relishing in that slick, squelching sound that makes Sirius blush so fucking pretty.
Hear how wet you are for me.
Sirius whimpers, his face hidden, but he starts to lift his hips after a moment, rocking back against Remus's hand.
Please.
He breathes shaky. Remus almost teases him, almost asks, please what? But at this point it feels cruel to both of them to play at cool detachment. Instead, he pulls his fingers free, wiping them carelessly on the bedspread, then coaxing Sirius to roll onto his back.
Such a mess,
Remus growls, catching one of his legs by the back of the knee and pressing it up to his chest. With his other hand, Remus grasps his own cock, finding Sirius's hole and dragging the head over it roughly, snagging on the clenching ring of muscle.
Wet and fucking sloppy,
He groans as he pushes inside, one thrust all the way to the hilt, his restraint long shattered.
Oh god, fuck.
Sirius claws frantically at Remus's shoulders as Remus starts to fuck him in long, deep strokes. Remus leans down, forcing Sirius's knee up to somewhere near his shoulder, folding him in half and looming over him, dwarfing him and driving him bodily up the bed with each savage thrust. Sirius tilts his chin up, searching, and Remus seals their mouths together in a clumsy, panting kiss. This is Remus out of control, a state he doesn't reach easily, nor lightly. He feels Sirius clamp one grasping hand on his ass, urging him forward. His thighs are burning, his muscles protesting, exhausted, but it's pure instinct driving him now, driving them both. Breaking the kiss to take a gasping breath, he sees Sirius's arm fly up to brace against the headboard, wiry muscles straining as he shoves himself down to meet Remus's thrusts. Remus stares down at him, at his flushed, shining face, his hair slipping from its bun and curling wildly around him, his skin dotted with bites and hickeys. Balancing on one arm, he grasps Sirius's jaw roughly, tilting him to the side and bringing his mouth down to the deep red splotch just over the pulse in his neck.
Fucking love you so much,
He snarls, biting down on that spot again, worrying the skin between his teeth, sucking on it, desperate to make the mark last.
Love you.
Sirius gasps, nails dragging harshly across Remus's back, leaving his own brand.
Want. You.
Remus feels him swallow, his throat bobbing.
Put a baby in me.
fuck,
Remus groans, feeling Sirius's legs slip down off his shoulder, tangling his hands in his mess of black hair and bracing him against the thrusts that threatened to concuss him on the headboard, smashing their faces together. The bed is creaking, banging against the wall, and his knot is swelling, catching on Sirius's rim each time he shoves his hips forward, each time he pulls back. He feels a novel wetness on his cheek, something more than just the sweat they're both covered in, and turns his face enough to see Sirius's lashes wet and clumped together, his eyes shut tight. Remus feels positively feral as he drags the flat of his tongue across Sirius's temple, tasting the salt of sweat and tears, and he'll never admit it after tonight, but that's what tips him over the edge. Sirius sobs into his ear, fresh tears falling, his wet, grasping hole clenching rhythmically around Remus's knot, milking every pulse from him. Remus has to tighten his jaw, has to tense every muscle to keep a lid on the urge to keep thrusting, which is alarming, but Sirius is a vice grip around him, so he probably couldn't pull out if he tried. He thinks he might be talking. He's always fucking talking when he's got Sirius under him. But he's fucked if he knows what he's saying. It doesn't matter, because Sirius is crying out, biting down on his shoulder, and coming nearly dry between them, just a weak dribble onto his belly, his body wrung out and spent.
I'm. God, fuck.
He whimpers, clumsy hands in Remus's hair, and Remus gives a low rumble of a noise, placing kisses along his cheeks, his jaw, until he slots their lips together. Sirius lets Remus's tongue inside, but he doesn't seem capable of coordinating any other response, just opening and allowing Remus to invade his body again. There's drool on both their chins once Remus gets his fill, propping himself up enough to take a look at Sirius's face.
Baby,
he murmurs, thumbing over his slick, parted lips. Sirius grunts softly, half asleep already. Remus taps his cheek.
Sirius.
Sirius blinks unfocused eyes up at him, giving him a small, bleary smile.
Hi,
he says, raspy.
Do you want to roll over?
Remus asks him, pushing the sweaty hair off his forehead.
Nuh-uh.
Sirius says, his eyes sliding closed again.
Feels good.
His arms tighten around Remus's chest for a moment, urging him to let Sirius take the weight of his body. Remus shifts, distributing his weight enough to be assured that Sirius isn't going to asphyxiate in his sleep, and feels his own eyelids slipping shut. He shoves his face into Sirius's sweaty hair, content to fill his lungs with the scent of his abating heat as he drifts into a light sleep. The room is pitch black when he feels Sirius stirring under him, the sun long set. His senses return sluggishly.
God, you're heavy.
He hears Sirius mutter, pushing at his shoulders ineffectually. Dimly, Remus realizes his knot has gone down completely for the first time tonight, and he'd slipped out of Sirius's body at some point while they slept.
Sorry,
he says hoarsely, rolling onto his back with more effort than it should rightly require.
I gotta pee,
Sirius says, and Remus watches him sit up gingerly, rolling his neck and smiling when it cracks. He pushes himself off the bed, and Remus doesn't miss the wobble in his knees, tamping down the impulse to follow him, offer to hold him up, protect him from the horrors of having to stand under his own power. Sirius calls those his big dumb alpha urges, and it always takes a while for them to fade after a heat. Instead, Remus stretches his aching muscles, feeling his back twinge a little as he arches it off the bed. He can't imagine how Sirius is feeling right now. He waits a customary 5 minutes, hearing Sirius bustling around in their ensuite, before he gives in to the voice in his head and gets up to join him. He finds Sirius standing in front of the mirror, his soft curls let loose from their tie and cascading wildly down over his shoulders. He's trailing his fingers over the marks on his neck, and he smiles when he sees Remus in the doorway.
You outdid yourself,
he says, tilting his head to the side and showing off the biggest one, just under the point of his jaw. Remus feels his cheeks heating, but he can't bring himself to apologize, coming up behind Sirius and wrapping his arms around his waist.
Should I wear a tank top to work tomorrow?
Remus tightens his arms, trying and mostly failing to swallow the low growl that works its way up from his chest. He's never had a jealous streak. Sirius covers that enough for both of them. But the thought of Sirius's employees at the garage, most of them alphas, seeing all those purple bite marks scattered across his shoulders and trailing up his delicate throat, well, Sirius knows his buttons too well.
If you want.
Remus tries to sound nonchalant. Sirius says knowingly. Remus raises his eyes to see Sirius smirking at him in the mirror, and realizes he's sucking out one of the marks, again.
I can't stop,
he mumbles, kissing the mottled, rapidly darkening spot in some semblance of apology.
Tank top it is,
Sirius says, reaching back with one arm to grasp Remus's neck, using the other to press their hands to his belly.
Soon you won't need to bite. Everyone'll know.
Remus groans, stroking his fingers over the soft skin and imagining it taut and round.
You really want to?
Sirius meets his eyes in the mirror and nods.
If you're ready.
Remus takes a breath, detecting the barely there tang of the tail end of Sirius's heat.
Next time.
Sirius bites his lip, turning his head to butt his nose up against Remus's jaw affectionately.
Let's get back in bed,
he says softly. Remus follows him back into their bedroom, and Sirius strips the comforter off before they lie down, tossing it in the general direction of the laundry basket. They settle on their sides on the sheets, facing each other.
I don't want to pressure you,
Sirius says gently, carting his fingers through Remus's hair.
I'm not gonna hold you to anything you say while we're fucking. I know that's not fair. If you say you want to wait, we'll wait.
Remus shuts his eyes, images forming in his mind so clearly it feels like a premonition. Sirius pregnant, his belly big and round, impossibly large on his small frame. Sirius holding their baby in his arms, a soft little creature with his black hair and Remus's freckles. Sirius next to him in the middle of the night, half asleep while he feeds their child with an exhausted smile on his face. If Remus could make it happen right this fucking second, he would.
I'm ready,
he says, sure to keep his voice steady, needing Sirius to hear the conviction he feels in his chest. Sirius bites his bottom lip as his face splits into a grin.
You're ready?
He asks, inching closer to Remus on the bed, tangling their legs together.
Yeah,
Remus says, matching his smile in kind, stealing in to kiss him quickly.
I'll stop the pill tomorrow.
Okay.
Sirius breathes, his eyes twinkling, his body thrumming with excitement. He rests their foreheads together, whispering,
We're gonna have a baby.
And tilting in for another kiss.
We're gonna have a baby,
Remus confirms, feeling the concept solidify into reality as he utters the words. They lie there for a while, just kissing, just touching, and it almost feels chaste, a striking contrast to the rest of the night. Eventually, Sirius pushes him onto his back, cuddling up to his side, his cheek against Remus's chest.
I'll tell Dorcas as soon as we know for sure,
he says, and Remus smiles, because of course Sirius is already planning, already laying out their next steps.
I'll have to train her to look after the shop while I'm gone,
Remus hums, kissing the top of his head. Sirius loves his shop and hates to delegate. He hopes Dorcas is prepared for whatever that training is going to entail, and may all the gods have mercy on her soul.
I can take a year,
Remus says, though Sirius already knows this. It's not the first time they've had this discussion, it's just the first time it's been a definite instead of a hypothetical.
I'll work until I can't,
Sirius continues, fingers idly tracing the coarse hair on Remus's chest.
I mean, there'll come a point where you just can't fit under the cars, right?
Sirius cranes his neck to look up at him, one eyebrow cocked.
Like, on the rolly cart thingies,
Remus explains, gesturing. Sirius grins.
You greatly overestimate the amount of time I spend actually lying on the ground underneath cars.
Remus chews on the inside of his cheek. It's hard to picture Sirius not working. It's hard to picture Sirius not constantly moving, if he's honest. He's not the stay-at-home type, and never has been.
I don't want you to have to give up the things you love,
Remus says softly. Sirius surges up, catching him in a kiss.
I love you. I love our family. I've always known that having kids would mean sacrifices, that never stopped me from wanting them.
Remus nods. He knows Sirius has thought this through, likely even more than Remus has. It's just bizarre to imagine him up to his elbows in diapers, rather than engine grease. Taking a breath, Remus ventures.
Does that mean you'll?
Sirius holds up one finger to stop him.
Absolutely not.
You didn't even let me finish.
I didn't need to.
Sirius says, resting his cheek back on Remus's chest with a grin.
How do you know what I was going to say?
Remus demands. Sirius gives a long-suffering sigh.
Fine, say it.
Will you sell the bike?
See, I didn't need to let you finish.
He says, meeting Remus's eyes again.
The bike is non-negotiable, and you know it. I put it in my vows for a reason.
It's a death trap,
Remus mutters, though he already knew this was a losing argument when he started it.
Hush, Grandpa.
Sirius pats his chest placatingly. Remus huffs a laugh through his nose, bringing his arms up to encircle Sirius's shoulders, squeezing him tight.
We're gonna have a baby,
he says after a minute, just wanting to hear the words again.
Yes, we are.
Sirius whispers, turning his face to kiss Remus's chest once, then again, and again, slow and deliberate. Remus runs a hand down his back soothingly.
Fever,
he asks, trying to gauge it from the heat under his palm. Sirius shrugs.
Still there.
He murmurs, sealing his lips over Remus's nipple and sucking. Remus's breath catches in his throat, and he trails his fingers down over Sirius's ass and traces his hole carefully. He whimpers at the light touch, but he's wet and clenching, trying to draw the finger inside.
You're sore,
Remus says, dipping his fingertip in and feeling Sirius tense against his side.
It's okay,
Sirius says shakily, inching his legs apart, probably completely unconsciously.
Just one more. Real slow.
Remus shuts his eyes, feeling his cock twitching in interest again. His body is almost as much a slave to Sirius's hormones as Sirius himself is. His mate is asking for him, he can't say no.
Real slow,
he repeats, kissing the top of Sirius's head. He arranges them so he's spooning up behind Sirius, a comfortable position for sleep when they both inevitably pass out as soon as they're done. He lays kisses along Sirius's shoulder and neck, reaching around to thread their fingers together.
Ready?
He asks, pausing with the head of his cock just resting at his entrance. Sirius nods, squeezing his hand. He goes taut as Remus presses inside him, his whole body trembling with it, but he reaches back when Remus hesitates, grasping at his thigh.
Don't stop,
he says urgently, his voice strained and shaking. Remus feels a pang of guilt as he pushes the rest of the way in, pausing when his hips come up flush on Sirius's ass.
I'm hurting you,
Remus says pointlessly, because he knows they're not stopping now, knows Sirius needs this and that need will override whatever pain he'll have to put up with to get it.
I'm okay,
Sirius says, a little steadier. He reaches back blindly and pets Remus's cheek with clumsy fingers.
I'm okay, baby, I promise. Just need you to move now, please?
Slow,
Remus murmurs, pressing his nose into Sirius's hair. He pulls out halfway and thrusts back in, a fluid motion.
Slow, yeah.
Sirius sighs, his body finally relaxing.
Feels good.
Remus keeps that pace, holding Sirius's hip to keep him still, making sure not to jostle him or thrust too fast or hard. Any other time, this would be torturous for them both, but they're wrung out, exhausted. This is almost perfunctory, just one last necessary act to quell the fever once and for all. It feels like no time at all before his knot starts to make itself known, and yet it also feels like they've been lying here like this for hours, drifting in an odd sort of fugue state, Sirius half asleep and Remus fighting to keep up his steady rhythm.
Yes,
he hears Sirius whisper as the knot starts to catch on his rim, though it must be hurting him to be stretched like that at this point. Remus reaches up and takes hold of his chin, turning his head for a kiss that neither of them can coordinate worth a damn.
Love you,
Remus breathes into his mouth, pushing in and holding himself there, just rolling his hips carefully to keep up a little friction.
Love you,
Sirius echoes, a soft little whine working its way up from his chest as Remus's knot locks them together. The orgasm is more relief than release, his arm holding tight around Sirius's waist as he fills him one more time, to the sound of exhausted, quivering moans. There's nothing else to say tonight, nothing else to do. Sirius's breathing soon goes deep and steady, and Remus holds him tight to his chest, pressing slow, soft kisses to his neck and shoulder. He rolls the words around in his head again.
We're gonna have a baby,
and feels them settle in like a fact he's always known. It seems odd for such a quiet moment to feel so immense. It hasn't happened yet, and Remus already feels different, feels like they've crossed a threshold. It's terrifying, but not in the way he'd expected. It's inevitable, their next step, where they've always been heading. A new life, a little family. A different existence entirely. Remus closes his eyes, lulled to sleep by the soft rhythm of their even breaths. Finite. Thanks for listening to this text-to-speech podfic composed by Burning Aurora.